Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I will review Philip K. Dick's book Counterclock World from 1967. The book is set in 1998, where the flow of time has mysteriously been reversed in a process known as the Hobart phase. It is one of those PKD novels where the central idea is so strange and fertile that you almost forgive it for everything else it messes up along the way. Almost. I'll walk you through what it's about, what it's really doing, and where it works as a novel. On the surface, the novel reads like a science fiction thriller about the resurrection of a powerful religious leader, the Anarch Peak, and the political struggle to control him. Underneath, though, Dick uses the reversed time premise to explore themes of power, religion, race, and the fragility of meaning itself. So, time has entered a cosmic reversal in which certain processes move backwards. The most dramatic consequence is that some of the dead wake up again and go through a process called old birth. When they are rescued out of their graves, they return to life inside vitariums. Those are institutions that manage these reanimated people and reintegrate them into society. The protagonist, Sebastian Hermes, who runs a small vitarium, discovers that a particularly important figure has just old birthed. The Anarch Peak, a kind of global spiritual leader whose death had monumental cultural and political consequences. Once word leaks that Peak is back, the scramble begins. Religious groups, government agencies, and private interests all want control of him, either to use his influence or to silence him, or to reshape his legacy. That's the plot skeleton, a race to control a resurrected prophet in a world where time runs strangely backwards. And it is quite entertaining as such. At some point it does even develop into a kind of slapstick comedy for its dense and fast-paced narration. But it is a Dick novel, and so there is much more to the book than this. Hobart phase, making the world running backward, is not just a neat gimmick, it's the structural core of the book. Time reversal began in 1986 and now shapes every aspect of social life. Some of the key inversions are that the dead experience old birth, they revive in their graves, are dug up and live life backwards until they return to the womb, ultimately splitting into egg and sperm. Also, certain biological processes and everyday life things are reversed. For instance, cigarettes are smoked backwards. People blow smoke into cigarette butts, which gradually reconstitutes a full cigarette while cleaning the air. Or social scripts change. People say goodbye as a greeting and hello as a farewell. Libraries exist not to preserve books, but to erase them as time flows backward past their publication dates. Dick only partly follows through on the logical consequences of time running backwards. While certain aspects of life are being reversed, the law of cause and effect is largely maintained, and the reader does follow a straightforward, linear storyline. It seems Dick was just much less interested in a strict physical model than in a cognitive and cultural shock experiment. With this novel, he asks, what happens to meaning, morality, and institutions when the underlying direction of time is flipped? And in that respect, he succeeds. In my opinion, the counterclock gimmicks the book features suffice for the reader to put themselves into the shoes of the characters. But as much as the time reversal concept is brilliant, its execution is messy. The narrative centers on Sebastian Hermes, a former old-born who runs a small vitarium, a business that legally retrieves the resurrected dead and prepares them for re-entry into society. Hermes becomes entangled in a geopolitical and religious storm when he discovers that Anarch Thomas Peak, a revered black religious leader who died in 1971, is about to old birth. Peak's return has enormous symbolic and political weight. Whoever controls the Anarch's body and voice effectively gains moral authority and maybe leverage over the world. Multiple factions try to obtain control of the Anarch. The Vitarium itself, the library, and religious groups such as the Uditi and the Rome Syndicate, a powerful Caucasian religious authority. The plot unfolds as a struggle over who gets to speak through Peak, or perhaps more precisely, whose agenda Peak will legitimize. When the library abducts him, different sides use Hermes and his wife Lotta as pawns in their scramble for custody. The novel moves towards a bleak conclusion. Peak is ultimately killed, and the story hints at possible interracial conflict on a massive scale as a consequence of this final death. Dick sets the story in a partitioned United States with a white-dominated Western United States and a black majority Free Negro municipality in the East, whose national religion is the Uditi faith. The Uditi see Peak as a messianic figure. His resurrection is both a spiritual event and a symbol of black autonomy. The Rome Syndicate and Western institutions view Uditi with deep suspicion, filtering them through racist stereotypes and political paranoia. In this sense, Counterclock World uses speculative time physics to foreground very terrestrial tensions around race, colonialism, and religious authority. The backwards flow of time doesn't heal divisions. It simply reconfigures the battlefield on which they play out. The religious movement surrounding Peak is obviously modelled in part on black nationalist and quasi-Islamic movements of mid-20th century America. Dick tries to imagine a future spiritual political leader rising from those communities and becoming globally influential. This is one of the more dated aspects of the novel. On one hand, Dick is clearly interested in race, oppression, and counter-hegemonic movements. On the other hand, his portrayal of non-white characters and religious minorities can feel simplistic and occasionally cringe by modern standards. The library's mission is to systematically destroy books that have passed their original publication point as time regresses. Normally, libraries symbolize memory, continuity, and the preservation of human culture. Here they embody organized forgetting. This inversion works on multiple levels. It's an elegant metaphor for censorship and historical revisionism. It hints at the fragility of textual authority. If time's arrow can flip, then so can the status of a book, from knowledge to waste, from canonical to forbidden. It prefigures Dick's broader obsession in other works like Ubik and The Man in the High Castle with unstable realities and the unreliability of archives, history, and official narratives. By making erasure the default and preservation the resistance, Dick suggests that remembering is never neutral. It is also a political act. Sebastian Hermes is a typical Dick protagonist, not a heroic genius, but a somewhat ordinary worker caught in powers far beyond his control. His vitarium is small and precarious, and he is repeatedly manipulated by larger religious and political organizations. Across the cast, Dick emphasizes three aspects. Ambivalence. Almost no one is purely good or evil. Characters are motivated by a mix of fear, ambition, loyalty, and confusion. Paranoia and uncertainty. It's often unclear who is telling the truth, who controls whom, and what exactly Peak represents. Fragile identity. In a world where age runs backward and life itself is a kind of unhappening, the sense of a stable self is threatened. People are literally headed towards dissolution. This fits with Dick's recurring focus on the instability of reality and identity, the idea that both are contingent constructs that can be flipped, edited, or erased like texts. Counterclock World is one of Dick's more theologically loaded books. From the start, it signals that it isn't just a thought experiment about reverse time, but a novel about revelation, authority, and sacred speech. Dick's use of epigraphs, brief, quasi-scriptural fragments at the head of each chapter, works in tandem with Anarch Peak's Post-Mortem Enlightenment to explore how religious ideas are created, codified, and also distorted. The epigraphs act like a second layer laid over the narrative. They sound like maxims, liturgical snippets, or doctrinal slogans, often echoing Peak's spiritual universe. Structurally, they come from outside the story's time, as if from a later age that has already processed and canonized Peak's message. Meanwhile, the diegetic plot shows the messy, contingent world of Vitariums, state agencies, and rival religious movements fighting over his resurrected body and voice. In a universe where physical time runs backward, the epigraphs are paradoxically stable. They hint that theological or textual time moves forward. Sayings accumulate, interpretations harden, myth thickens into scripture. Dick quietly suggests that even if the cosmos reverses, the human impulse to fix revelation into authoritative scripture remains. Institutions already treat the Anarch's word as usable fragments, like the epigraphs themselves. His post-death attitude is marked by detachment from his own cult and personality, and a sharp awareness that his teachings will be co-opted. He embodies not only spiritual insight, but a meta-theological insight into how revelation is managed and abused. The epigraphs, then, are not neutral literary decoration. They expose how religious language becomes a tool of control, quotable, teachable, easy to weaponize. Each polished statement at a chapter's head is followed by scenes that show theology entangled with fear, bureaucracy, and opportunism. Peak's living presence resists being reduced to such sound bites. Formally, Dick makes the reader move from epigraph to event, from tidy thesis to narrative complication, mirroring the journey from doctrine to lived experience. In Counterclock World, epigraph and anarch together stage the instability of sacred speech. Revelation can be quoted and framed, but never fully contained, even when time itself runs in reverse. So Sebastian Hermes is a typical Dick protagonist, a slightly shabby, morally ambiguous small businessman trying to stay afloat in a hostile system. He's not a hero so much as a guy caught in the gears. Other characters, Peak himself, various religious figures, government operatives, Hermes' wife, and associates are sketched in bold strokes, but not deeply developed. You get that classic Dick flavor of paranoia and shifting alliances. people making compromises they don't fully understand, sudden, ethically messy decisions under pressure. But this is not a character-driven novel in the psychological sense. Characters tend to function as carriers of ideas or plot energy, rather than as fully believable human minds with complex inner lives. Counterclockwork takes a single radical idea, time running backward, and pushes it into law, religion, economics, and everyday life. Through the Hobart phase, Philip K. Dick asks what it would mean to live in a world where resurrection is routine, forgetting is institutionalized, and the past is literally approaching us from ahead. If you read this book with even mild logical vigilance, the Hobart phase collapses quickly. Dick applies the reversal selectively and sometimes lazily. Physics doesn't really work this way. Biology is hand-waved, and even within the story, characters drift in and out of reversed behavior, depending on the scene's demands. If you're the kind of reader who requires conceptual consistency, this book will drive you slightly mad. If you're willing to treat the time reversal as a metaphorical framework rather than a fully coherent system, it's far more rewarding. The novel's real subject is not just reversed chronology, but who gets to define the meaning of life, death, and history when even time itself refuses to cooperate. In its mix of theological speculation, racial politics, and temporal weirdness, Counterclockwork may be uneven, but it is unmistakably Dick, unsettling, conceptually daring, and haunted by the suspicion that reality is never as stable or as linear as we'd like to believe. I give this book 5 out of 5 sorghum pipes and highly recommend you read it too. That was it for today. If this was worth your time, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in my next episode. Thanks. Bye-bye.